What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. Of course, this is TWA Motorsports, and today, yeah, I know. Look, we've tinkered with the suspension on my wife's daily driver for a minute now, and here's ultimately why I'm doing what I'm doing in today's video. So, guys, I ordered an actual kit from belltech, and I'll list in the description down below, but the main parts, we're not going to be using that back there wrapped up. And we're not going to be using this box here. This kit I found used locally, and like I said, I'll list in the description, but it comes with new front struts and new rear shocks. Why am I taking the ridetech stuff out? Well, guys, because I really want to move the ridetech stuff over to the Suburban, and in order to do that, I needed some replacement stuff. So today, we're going to be using what I would normally use before ridetech kind of came into play as far as with their coilover in the front. We're going to be reusing the factory strut, well, the factory shock, sorry, the factory spring, the top plate, but we're going to be using the belltech drop struts. And so how you achieve your drop with these, if you'll notice in the picture on the front, there's rings. The more rings you take out, the lower it goes. It basically moves the cup that holds the spring down. And so if you had nothing on there, I think it's like 3 inches of drop. If you put them all on there, I think it's 2 inches of lift. So I've used these in the past. I've had really good luck with them, guys. The other stuff that came with this kit, I'll list this separate as a package, so you can get these and these as a kit. It's about 300 bucks, and they ride pretty decent, guys. I can't complain. So I'm also going to be putting these in the back because we're going to be robbing the ridetech stuff and moving it to the Suburban at some point, even though the Suburban isn't running yet. This also came with alignment bushings if you wanted to replace your upper A-arm bushings to get a little bit more adjustment. Guys, that's more for the guy who wants to go 3 inches in the front with a drop like this. If you want to go 3 inches in the front, get a spindle, use this for the other inch or inch and a half. That way you don't have to use these alignment bushings. They are a pain to install. I will never be using them. They're going to stay in that box, probably never be opened. But this kit I came with, guys, actually comes with the springs that we just installed here recently in the back. Remember, I cheaped out and went with some eBay drop springs, went to the 5305 belltechs, which you have to buy in a kit. Yeah, that's what's in that box, or that's what's wrapped up right there. Like I said, we won't be using those, but I am going to be using those on the Suburban. So it made sense to buy this used, and I picked it up relatively cheap. Actually, I picked it up cheaper than I could just buy the shocks for. So either way, I'm going to show you guys the process of doing this. I don't have the Yukon down here right now, but we don't need it just yet because I'm going to start by disassembling these guys and kind of show you that process. So in order to get this accomplished and take these things apart, guys, you're going to need one thing for sure: WD-40 PB blaster. You need to spray this guy right here, and I probably should have sprayed it ahead of time, but it'll be fine. And you need a pair of strut compressors. Now, what do these do? Well, these guys will, man, these are pretty rough shape. I've had these for a minute, but we need these to compress the strut or the spring in order to get the strut out from inside of it. And normally I go from the bottom like this. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our impact, we're gonna run this up tight on both sides. There's two of them, one for each side. Once we get that snug down, then we'll worry about removing our upper nut and getting the strut apart. Now, once we get these pinched together like what I've got, I generally leave a little bit of pressure on them, guys, for when they're coming apart. But here's one other thing I like to do. This guy only goes together one way. So these things are not symmetrical. So I like to mark up top here where this meets. I don't know if you can see, if I can turn it over here. See this, where the spring dips in? Excuse me. I like to mark that. That means this guy right here lines up with that. Believe me, it'll save you some headache down the road. Okay, now that we've got that accomplished, we've got that spring compressed, we need to grab, I want to say it's a 17 millimeter. It may be. Yeah, I think it's a 17. Let's go grab that, see if we can knock this loose. Okay, sorry, it's an 18 millimeter. I think as many of these as I've done, I'd know that. All right, so make sure your drill has plenty of energy, so a new fresh battery, and we're gonna hit this and see if we can knock it loose. Not too bad. All right, now we can disassemble this top piece. Now guys, look, keep this stuff together just kind of like a puzzle as it comes apart, okay? So we got our old strut out. we don't necessarily have to, actually, we don't even have to take this apart. What we do have to get out though is this bump stop and this bottom bracket. There we go. All right, the bump stop, we gotta take this old one out because we're not reusing it. So remember, this faces down. So we're just gonna set it over here just in the manner that it came out. The rest of this we can leave for just for right now. Now we're gonna open up our new strut assembly and see what we've got to deal with there. So this is what your new strut should come with. You should have what they call a bottom plate. Okay, that's where our spring is gonna set now. You're obviously gonna have a shock, which we're gonna take apart here. We're gonna take this off, we're gonna take this off. Now, that is what we have. Now you can see the rings. How we have, if we took all the rings off, we'd have 3 inches of drop. And that's where the instructions come into play here, guys. It's gonna tell you how to take it apart, how to disassemble, blah, blah, blah. Now, right here, it's telling you on the reassembly part, do you have auto ride or do you not? We do not have auto ride. So 2 rings would get us 2 inches of drop, or yeah. 4 rings, so if we had 4 rings on here, we'd get 1 inch of drop. So here's what I'm planning on doing. I'm gonna attempt to get 3 inches total, or 3.5 inches total. So basically what that means, I got 2 inches out of the spindle already. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense because we have the ridetech stuff on there, but I'm gonna go with 3 rings because that'll give me 1.5 inches of drop in the front. So you can see we've got 1, 2, 3 rings. If we took it off, we would have, and they're all the same, guys, so you don't have to worry about, used to back in the day, the older versions of these were not. So once you do that, then we can put our spring cup on, and the opening, all right, that goes over this, the rings needs to go down. A lot of times, guys, people install these upside down. That will give you a massive amount of lift. So don't do that. So once we get that on there, I am going to take a couple pieces off of the old strut. One of them being the spring isolator. Guys, this just kind of keeps your spring from squeaking. I think I'm gonna have to have I'm gonna clean that up anyway. But then we'll also need these guys that hold the lower strut in place. So we need to grab those off there and then we'll go back together with this new guy. Once we've got this removed, I'm gonna put this on. That's that isolator, remember? We've got the new bump stop, which will go in the bump stop cup, just like the old one. Okay, that makes sense. All right, guys, these are kind of hit or miss for me. You don't have to use them. I think belltech primarily uses them more for shipping. I'm gonna put this one in just to give just one of them. You notice there was 2 in there. But we're gonna slide that in place. And then once we do that, we need to put this guy back in. Oh, I guess it would make more sense if we did it this way, huh? Put that on, put this down there, put it on its top, and then we need to reinstall this guy. However, remember we're lining up that mark, which isn't as imperative right now because it's not tight, but it becomes that way because, like I said, these, I don't know if you guys can see these openings where the head of the bolt sets in. They will only set in one way because, like I said, they are not symmetrical. Now, we need to get this guy in place, and here's what's gonna happen. It's going to take you holding the top of this. Hopefully you guys can see it. I hope I'm not out of camera. It's gonna take you holding the top of this in order to tighten this down. You can run it down with the impact, but it's gonna stop and start to spin. Now, as I said, I tightened it down with the impact, but you're gonna need to grab the end of this and snug it the rest of the way down. This is a 16 millimeter, by the way, and I may actually be there. I think I am. I didn't know if I was tight enough or not. It's hard to tell because you don't have any, the strut, or the spring, I mean, is so snug. Yeah, we are there. Now look, is there a torque spec on that? I'm sure there is. But here's what we need to keep in mind. When we take this apart, we need that white mark that I made. Where is it at? Right there. We need that right there. Because as we loosen the spring, it's gonna push it back apart, and the heads of those bolts are gonna line up in the holes that they're supposed to be. So, let's get our 3/4, which is what my spring compressors are. We're gonna kind of hold this together as we come apart. My battery's about toast, I think. And once these loosen up, you'll see what I'm talking about. See how that's not moving now. That's what we want. Wouldn't hurt to go ahead and give this another crank just to make sure that we're snug, but I'm sure that we are. And look guys, if you decide, hey, this is too low or this isn't low enough, you can always reverse the process, right? So we could pull this back around. That's snug. Or sorry, we could pull this back apart, and once we pull it back apart, we can either add rings or take rings off depending on, you know, where you're at and where you want your drop to be. The other thing we need off that strut, I was telling you, the old one, are these little guys at the bottom, and that's what retains our bolt. The bottom of these struts aren't threaded, so generally what you can do is take a small flat blade screwdriver and just pry against them, and they will come off like that. And unfortunately, they generally don't stay in place. You could go ahead and try to put them on the other, but we'll just wait until we get it up in the truck to try that. They generally just don't set. Yeah, see, they'll just fall out on the ground. Save yourself the headache. Do that when we're ready to put it in the truck. All right, I'm gonna knock this other one out off camera. Exact same situation, 3 rings. And then guys, we're gonna pull that Yukon in here and get this swapped out. Now that we've got both the struts assembled, we're gonna be taking this apart. And guys, this is all standard, so it's really not gonna weigh into what you do. Normally you would have 18 millimeters up top, 15s from the bottom. That's what we're gonna be putting back in. So you'll have the 3 18 millimeter nut to get that out. You'll have the 15 millimeters at the bottom to get that out. Generally, I have to use a 15 on the sway bar. So we're gonna knock all this stuff out real quick. Like I said, it isn't gonna make much sense because this is all gonna be standard. But I'm gonna get this all out of place. We'll move it out, grab the new stuff, and we'll kind of show you how it goes in. I think I'll have enough room to sneak it in here, but I really won't know until I get stuff apart. Now that we have the old stuff out of the way, I mean, there's a couple brackets. Obviously, there was one on the top, one on the bottom, and then the 2 through bolts of the actual coilover itself. Let's see if we can fit this thing in here. Sometimes, guys, they do not want to cooperate, and I've left the 15 millimeter and the sway bar hooked up. I just don't know if we have enough room here. We may. Hey, that looks promising, kinda. We can just find the openings here. Oh, we're stuck. Yeah. We're gonna have to loosen the sway bar. There's no way around it. I really don't want to take the axle out, but guys, I need it to drop a little more. And what's happening is the sway bar is holding it. So I'm gonna go grab a 15 millimeter and we'll loosen up that sway bar. Now, hopefully you can tell now, I'd like to set a couple of these up here so I can get it started. These are the 18s that are gonna come in from the top. See how much more room it goes down? That's what I needed. And so what I'm hoping is now we can get it up into place. What I may have to do is get some weight on this. My wife just got through driving it, so the brakes are crazy hot. Yeah, it's not cooperating with me. I'm trying to lay on it to get a little bit additional push down, just not working. Guys, I'm not taking that four-wheel drive shaft out. Mainly because I just don't want to retorque it. It's a pain. What are we hitting? Yeah. That shaft is what we were hitting. So we're going to work back and forth here. We'll get it up there in a minute. Yeah, it is not wanting to play nice, is it? All right, I'm gonna need some light up in there. I don't think my camera is gonna be able to get me in there while I'm doing this. So we'll maneuver it back and forth, see if we can get it started. Once I get these through that top plate, then we should be able to get those 18s on it and at least kind of snug them down. Well, I'm not gonna fight and fight and fight. I'm just gonna take those 15s out. There's 6 15s that hold the inner flange in, and ultimately, guys, what I need to move it out. If I could get more weight on this, if this wasn't so freaking hot, I think I might be able to get it out of the way. But look, if we go ahead and just zip those out with the impact and an extension, we'll be able to torque them back. I'll hold this. I only have just me out here. The pain about torquing them is it wants to spin as you're torquing, but it's not a huge deal. It's free spinning. Let's just get them out. So I've got it loose and moved over. Hopefully I don't have to take the front side out, but let's give it another shot here and see if we can get this guy in now. And it may still cause this problem. We may have to I hope we don't have to take the shaft completely out, but we just need it to go over a little bit. Yeah, that's what I needed. There we go. All right. So now we can go ahead and put these back into position, the 18s that go on top. There's 3 of them. Guys, I like to snug them down either with the hood open, or they don't take much. I want to say it's like 37 foot-pounds. You can do that with a ratcheting wrench from down below. But we'll get them started at least. And then remember the little pieces that we took off the back or the bottom of the old shock. We need to get it in place. The little keepers for the bottom. I'll bring you guys in a little closer here in just a second and show you what I'm talking about. Let's take a closer look. You can see what I'm talking about, those little clips. I went ahead and started the 15s in there and snugged them up by hand. I've got the 18, the nut on the top snugged up by hand. I don't want to torque these yet. I want to lift the suspension. And then guys, I also put the 15 millimeters back in the axle shaft. You can see one of them right there, one right below. Snug those up by hand. And I also put the sway bar end link back into place, snugged it up by hand. But like I said, I want to torque this with weight on the suspension. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go knock out the other side real quick in the same process. Then we'll come back and talk about torque specs. But yeah, not a whole lot to it. You know, maybe if you wanted to mess around a little longer, you might have been able to make clearance without having to take the axle shaft out. But look, guys, it's just 6 bolts. It's just, we're gonna have to put a pry bar here on the wheel and hold with my knees while I'm torquing it. It's just a little more cumbersome. So there's a couple things we can torque without the suspension loaded, and that is 37 foot-pounds on the bottom bolts that come up from the bottom. Good night. And then the other thing is the CV axle. So 37 on these, and the reason we can tighten these is there's a bushing that spins, but we don't want to tighten the top ones yet. But the CV bushings, or the CV shaft, also 15 millimeter, and they go to, I have it written down, 57 foot-pounds. So, like I said, guys, if you do this, which I think you're going to have to, after trying the other side without taking it out, I ended up having to do it. So 57, but generally what has to happen is we have to get it lined up here. Sorry, I hit the camera. So you have to use an extension, and see what I'm talking about, how the wheel spins? So you're going to have a pry bar to put in the wheel and kind of hold it, or have somebody hold it while you're doing this. So I'm gonna do that off camera. Just gonna put my pry bar up against the studs. We'll get this torqued down, and then we'll lift the suspension up, torque the top ones and the sway bar. So lifting from this bottom piece here, we need to torque the upper 18 millimeters to 37 foot-pounds. So guys, I'm gonna get them snug right here. So the top and the bottom both go to 37, but I get them snug right here, and then I'll go up top, pop the hood, and torque them, because you can reach them from up above. They're pretty snug, actually. And then the sway bar. You don't want to bunch up your sway bar, so I like to lift the suspension and do this. Guys, 17 foot-pounds is what it calls for, but generally what I do is I use my impact, and I torque it until the center will not spin. And that is about back where it was. And so now I'm gonna go up top. We'll torque that to 37 under the hood. We'll get all our little connections hooked up, because with the old stuff, I didn't have that ability. They wouldn't fit over the bolt. So we'll get that torqued down and we'll get the wheel back on. And one thing I noticed when I was putting the wheel back on the other side is that it's a little closer to the ground. So we definitely came up a little, which is ultimately what we were wanting to do. We wanted to do two things. We wanted to bring it up just a little bit in the front, which I could have done with the coilover, but guys, like I said, I really like to use the ridetech stuff on the Suburban, because chances are, once the Suburban's actually finished, which could be a while, we'll probably be selling this. So my wife doesn't love SUVs, and so I thought we would buy a cheap one. That was the whole reason for us getting the Suburban. And we thought we may get her a car, you know, so she could drive a car every day if we needed to go somewhere where we needed a bunch of stuff, and we could take a cheaper Suburban that we don't necessarily have to spend $1 billion on. If that makes sense. Let's get these things torqued to 140. I'm gonna snug them down with this. And we're gonna move to the back and get the old shocks off. Now I just got back from taking it down the road just to get that front to settle out a little bit. And you can see we did come up quite a bit. I'd say at least an inch. It's a little more level now, guys. It was a little too slammed in the front, and I still think we're gonna put probably 100 or so miles on this. It'll settle out even more before we get it aligned. So it does need a new alignment. But yeah, look, we were dragging on the inner fenders a lot, and then like I said, I wanted to use those coilovers on something else. So it didn't make sense to crank them up and get it aligned when I was just gonna take them out later. So either way, got the front done. Let's move on to the back, get those ridetechs out of the back and the belltechs in. Now onto the back. Look, it should be relatively simple. I've got 21 millimeters here. Still got a 7/8 on there, but I've got it jacked up. I've also got it supported with jack stands, because chances are, guys, we're gonna have to let it down to get the shock loose. But 21 millimeter is what we're gonna take loose, and all we're doing here is we're gonna take the 21 loose at the top, which means you're gonna have to kind of snake over the frame here. The bottom one's relatively easy, but the reason I've got jack stands, other than, you know, just safety, is because we're probably gonna have to lift the rear end a little bit or let it down a little bit to get one out or the new one in. Now that we've got the old one out, you can see it there on the ground, all the washer packs that I had to use. We're gonna talk to ridetech about that before we go together on the other car. On the Suburban, we're gonna see if we can get some better bushings or something. This isn't gonna work for me. But either way, we just need to put the new shock back up in the old location. Remember, we do have shock relocators on this thing, which I do think are important. And we also have the DJM hardware kit to make the sway bar fit correctly. But let's get that thing on there. Now that we have both shocks in, so I went ahead and did the same thing on the other side. I've got the shock bolted down. Guys, we need to torque this thing and we will be finished with this project. The other thing I didn't show you, I did take the panhard rod out, but guys, you can go back and watch that video. I put an adjustable panhard rod in here. I really don't think you need one if you're at 4, even 4.5 inches. I've barely moved that thing. So I'm putting the stock one back in. The adjustable one is right here. I took it out. I didn't show you guys that. It is also 21 millimeter, but 85 foot-pound is what we need to torque the bottom and the top of the shock And like I said, we will be finished. We'll get this thing set on the ground. Well, at this point, we are completely finished. We've got all the old ridetech stuff off. Fronts, rears. Like I said, I took the panhard rod off. I haven't given it time to settle. This is exactly where I showed you right before we started on the back. But we got everybody out here right now. We got the guy with the sword. We got the little girl. It's the first time on camera. And mommy. We got it all out here. But anyway, guys, not a terrible job. It just seemed like it took longer than what I thought it should. You know, I had the ability to assemble the front stuff while she was gone in it, because obviously we had the ridetech stuff in place. But ultimately, guys, the biggest things that you're gonna have issues with when you do those struts or the front are the rust on the top side. So that center bolt that we took off, or that center nut that comes off the middle, guys, I would spray that. If you can let it set overnight, if it looks really rusty, that's a really good idea. But this thing is nasty. It was clean until we got just enough rain to get the road dirty, and she had to drive it, so it's gross. Again, that's just the beauty of white. I mean, on camera it looks pretty good, but you'll probably see it in the background in a couple other videos. I may do an update on how much that settles. Like I said, I think it'll come down another ½ inch or so. But all in all, I'm happy with the way it looks. I'm happy to have another project done. I'm soaked in sweat, guys. If you did enjoy that video, or this video, Cam, what do they need to do?
Hit that bell icon.
Hit the bell icon. Stay tuned to see what we work on next.